the Photography Online podcast, in partnership with Kingjoy Tripods.
Coming up in this month's podcast, we discuss world record-breaking photography in Nigeria and hear about the shark who ate a camera and spat out the footage, and the woman who got too close trying to take a selfie with another shark. Marcus attempts to break his losing streak in our pop quiz. And we look at a host of new camera and lens releases, plus decide if the world really needs a new tripod that can fit in your wallet.
And now, please welcome your panellists. A man who thought Intervalometer was an Italian team in the Champions League. It's Harry Martin.
Yeah, they beat Bayern Munich, didn't they?
And a man who thought hot shoe and tilt shift were ballroom dance techniques. It's Marcus McAdam.
Hey, you should see my Argentine tango, baby.
And here to keep them both in check, the lady who is always hyper-focused. It's Ruth Taylor.
Hey everybody, welcome to our April podcast. I am Ruth, your host, as you heard there. Footy fan Harry is with us this month as well. Marcus also. Welcome guys. We're kind of in the calm before the storm is what I'm thinking for this podcast, because we're all just about getting ready to head off on various trips, various adventures here at Photography Online. Harry getting ready to head out to Namibia with James very, very soon. In fact, when the podcast comes out, Harry, will you be actually out in Africa?
I think I must be, yeah. I'm trying to remember when I fly now. Yes, it's only a few weeks away. We certainly, I think we'll be missing the next live show unless we can somehow dial in from the middle of a desert, which I think is slightly unlikely.
Devastating. Marcus, shall we cope without them?
Well, I think it'll be an improvement, to be fair.
I don't know. Every time Harry comes back, he disappears for months at a time, it seems, Harry, and then he's here for a while. Second in a row for Harry, actually. You were on last month as well, but we needed to get him back in there. Nick and Adam prepping as well. They're heading out to the American Southwest in April, and Marcus and I heading over a little bit closer to home, but still across the water, so it feels like an adventure. We're heading off to Ireland as well. So it's a busy old month for us in April, but it's all good. It's all good. We're going to have the podcast coming out as usual. Fingers crossed. We were just discussing that earlier. It's like, how are we going to squash this into a 3-day period or something like that? But we'll work it out. In the news, we're going to start off this morning with various news stories that have been hitting our screens, not our newspapers these days, hitting our screens this month. Story number one, Marcus. It doesn't kind of strike at first glance. The headline doesn't strike as a photography story, but what is it?
Okay, so this is something that's popped up in the news quite often recently about the 7 planets all being visible at the same time in the night sky, which, from an astronomical point of view is a fairly rare occurrence because it won't happen again until 2040. I tried to find out when the last one happened and I couldn't. So if you try and Google when was the last planetary parade, which is what it's called, there's no information on it at all. Let's just guess and say the last time it happened was in 1796, and then it makes it sound more of a rarer phenomenon, doesn't it? But basically, the reason why this is worthy of the news in the podcast is because there were quite a few photographers getting quite excited about this and posting really poor pictures of just, a boring night sky, and then the subject was so obscure that they had to put arrows over the top of their photos to point out where all the planets were, because obviously they just look like stars. And the other thing is they had to exposure blend because you can't see. So the brightest of the planets is Venus, so you can see that with the naked eye. Jupiter's often really bright as well. Mars is identifiable because it's got like a red sort of hue to it, so you can always identify Mars with the naked eye. Mercury is far more difficult to see because it does look just like a star. It's very small. And then Saturn you can also see with the naked eye if you know where to look. But Uranus and Neptune are the two really faint ones. Apparently you can see, I think it's Uranus, if you've got really good eyesight and know exactly where to look, you can see it with a naked eye, but for most people would just assume that you can't see it. So those two planets are really difficult to see. So the only way you can capture them is to exposure blend and do a really long exposure to bring out the background. And then obviously they're spread across the entire sky. So you've got basically planets from horizon to horizon. So not only are they having to exposure blend, they're also having to stitch images together. And you end up with this compositional photograph that's got no bearing on reality whatsoever. And you just think, why don't you just use AI? I mean, you're going to get to the same. No, you're going to get to the same result, aren't you?
I was just thinking we've got no AI stories. How wonderful this morning. But thanks for bringing that back. So from a photography point of view, obviously it's a rare planetary thing if you're an astronomy fan. What is making photographers want to go out there and take it? Because as you said, it's not something that you can replicate easily onto a sheet of film or, a digital screen.
Obviously, you're going to have Earth in your peripheral vision as well. So you've basically got all 8 planets in our solar system all in the same view, which is a pretty remarkable thing. But it's one of those things that just doesn't translate very well to photography because the subject, apart from Earth, is so ridiculously small. They're basically 1 pixel. It's one of those things that don't bother taking a photo because it doesn't mean anything because the photo doesn't represent reality anyway.
Well, you say that, but then one of the most famous photographs of all time is the planet Earth taken from the moon, or not taken from the moon, taken from a lot further back. And as you recall, that was probably less than a pixel wide, and it was historic. It was because it was Earth, but you couldn't see what it was. So does it? Obviously, from a photographic point of view, you wouldn't put it on your wall, but still, in terms of capturing a moment in history. No,
but there wasn't any exposure blending. It was a single exposure, and you could actually see that it was Earth. I mean, it wasn't like 1 pixel; it was bigger than that. But yeah, it was taken from one of the Apollo missions as they passed around behind the moon, and they shot back with the moon in the foreground, which was massive because it was kind of like a quarter of the frame, wasn't it? And then you had this tiny little marble. I think it was called the blue marble, wasn't it?
No, it's a different shot I'm talking about, which just so it's not, we're not translating here. But anyway, either way, it was a historic shot of what was captured and identified later as Earth from very, very, very far away. But the point is, you couldn't tell by glancing at it what it was. So your point is, don't actually go out and take a shot if you can't tell what it is. Just go out and enjoy it.
Yeah, I just don't think that there's any gain from stitching all those photos together and doing multiple HDR blending and all of that stuff to end up with something that isn't visually appealing anyway. Just looks like a complete mess. It's the kind of photo that if you'd taken it on your iPhone, you'd go, what the hell is that? And delete it.
Yeah, but not every photo is about that. I say it's about, later on, we talked about during the Apollo feature we did, some of the shots that he took and the stars were in various places. And, looking at it as an image, as a pleasing image was not the point. It was all about, this is a place in time and this was actually what you saw at the time. And anyway, Harry, any thoughts?
Well, I hate agreeing with Marcus. But
hey!
I think we're just going to annoy a big subset of people like we did when we talked about shooting the aurora. But yeah, it's not something I would go and photograph because it's dots in the sky. I haven't got that deep interest in astrophotography, but I would stand outside. I did try to kind of just stand outside in the garden and try and see as many as possible. But I would use a telescope, as you can see a lot of detail in Saturn, for example, if you're looking at it through binoculars or a telescope and see all the rings, and that's quite interesting. So, yeah, from an observation point of view. But
I was thinking earlier that, this is supposedly a very rare occurrence, and I'm not disputing that whatsoever. Like I said, the next one's not until 2040, so we're talking 15 years in the future. So let's just assume the last one was 15 years ago, and they come around every 15 to 30 years. But when you think about the chances of any planet being above the horizon, has to be a 50-50 chance. Let's just take Venus as an example, okay? It's either above the horizon or it's below the horizon. And the horizon, everything above the horizon, represents 50% of space. So there's a 50-50 chance of Venus being above the horizon at any one time. Just go with my theory here. So if you're then going to go and stretch it to another planet, let's just say Mercury also has a 50-50 chance of being above the horizon. So now we've got a 50% chance of a 50% chance for 2 planets. And you keep working down until you get to 7. And it's basically 50% of 50% of 50% times 7. But then it has to be at night time as well, because otherwise you can't see them. So then that adds an 8th 50%. But surely 50% to the power of 8 doesn't mean that it should only come around every 15 years. That's a lot of days.
You do a lot of maths on the podcast, Marcus. And I lose you after about 3.5 seconds. I don't know if Harry's keeping up, but
the only thing I can think of is that because Venus and Mercury are closer to the sun than we are, then theoretically it's harder to get them in the same direction. So I think if you exclude Venus and Mercury, all the planets are basically further out in space. And I think they'll all align at a much more regular occurrence than the ones that are between us and the sun.
I think you're overlooking a massive aspect of physics and space, and that these are all orbiting And so they're going to
Yes.
be hidden behind the sun at various points and lining up the timings.
No, you're wrong there, because if they're hidden behind the sun, then we've already excluded that in our 50%, because I've said it has to be at night time, and there's a 50% chance that they're going to be in the sky. So I've already excluded that as an option. I think my maths is correct. I mean, Stephen Hawking has nothing on me.
Right. Okay. If you're interested in this story, there are links below. If you're interested, I'm sure you've actually seen images already online. I've seen a couple, and yeah, Marcus is right. There were arrows pointing to the various things so that you could see what you were actually looking at. But no, if you're interested in the one I mentioned as well, it's called the Pale Blue Dot, Marcus.
Okay.
NASA have just remastered it, and at first glance, it's like a speck of dust.
Right, so it must be a different shot.
It is a different shot.
I know the one you mean, Ruth. Yeah.
Yeah, it must be a different shot to the one I'm thinking of. And it wasn't taken by Apollo in that case. It was probably taken by...
It was taken by the Voyager space.
Yes,
yeah.
okay. Yeah, as it was heading right out, yeah.
Yeah, so have a wee look at that if you're interested. Anyway, moving on from from a mathematical start to the stories, we've got a far more interesting one here, Harry. What's this one about?
This is actually somebody that's broken the record for the most headshots taken in 1 hour.
It's not James then.
It's not a British Army record or anything like that, fortunately. It's a Nigerian photographer. He's only 28 years old as well, and I think he runs a photography academy, very similarly named to us. I think it's SP Academy. So, it could be a bit of a branding overlap there with our Sky Photo Academy. But he took 897 headshots of some high school children within 60 minutes, had them all lined up, getting them into frame, take a shot, out of frame, making sure they're posed and making sure they're proper photographs as well, not just, firing off.
Yeah, I was going to say, because the way to beat that record, Harry, would just to line up 1,000 people all in a line, and then just put a modern mirrorless camera on burst mode, and then just run along the line, just with it shooting at 100 frames a second or something.
No, this is all set up in front of a proper photography backdrop, clean backdrop, with a stool, kind of like your typical high school posed photograph. They would have been on, I don't know what, large format slide when you were in school, Marcus.
Tin plates,
but,
yeah.
Good luck with shooting 900 of those. How many did you say it was, Harry?
897.
Right, let's apply some maths here.
Oh, come on,
Okay.
Marcus.
No.
This was an interesting story for you.
Yeah, 897 divided by 60, so that is 15 per minute.
Yeah.
So that's one every 4 seconds. That's pretty good going.
The kids were doing all the work. I watched a wee clip of it, and they were, like Harry said, they were all lined up perfectly. He had somebody helping, I think, line them up, and they would kind of jog into frame, pose perfectly, and jog straight out. And every single one of them was just smooth as ice. It was just amazing.
He apparently was rehearsing for 12 months before attempting the record.
What, exercising that trigger finger, huh?
Well, yeah, I don't know what you assume kind of getting the routine of everything nailed down.
He didn't have it on a tripod either, which is interesting because obviously the stool remained in place. It would have made sense, but each time he lifted it to his eyes, took the photo, put it down to glance at it, and then the next kid came into frame, he lifted it up again. So,
but considering the previous record was only 500 headshots in a single hour, he's blown past it. So it's quite an impressive sort of way of upping the previous record holder. I don't know who the previous record holder was, but 28 years old and has sort of done it to try and raise awareness of photography in Nigeria and inspire sort of the local kids, basically, which I think is quite a nice way of doing it.
I think the way to beat that, okay, because there's no point in beating it just with another 5 people. So the way to do it is to do wet plate. So try and get the same amount of people in an hour on wet plate. Can you imagine the team that you would need for that?
You'd have to have several different cameras and like if you go out on a pheasant shoot and you have somebody handing you a fresh gun,
yeah, absolutely,
and then reloading your other one. That's what it'd have to be. You're changing.
You'd have to have a team of 10 people with 10 cameras, basically unloading and loading them, and then passing them to you every 4 seconds.
Maybe that's next year's challenge for the show, Ruth.
Well, there's an idea. We've had a few sent in actually, but anyway, you can check that out. There's a kind of fun little video of him doing that, and there will be links on the show notes. So have a wee look at that if you want. This is an interesting story. Marcus, it's marine life related. What's happened?
Yeah, so this is something which caught my eye because there was an underwater photographer who was down diving with a group of divers, and they were feeding sharks, they were tiger sharks. And this is in the Bahamas. And this particular guy is Andreas Nascimento. Sounds like a Japanese name, but anyway, they were lying on the floor of the ocean, feeding the sharks. And this particular tiger shark came up and took a fancy to his camera and basically bit on it. And then you see the camera go into the shark's mouth. And because it was a 360-degree camera, you can obviously, when you edit it, you can point the camera in any direction because it's filming all round at all times. So there's this amazing bit of footage which we'll put a link to so people can watch it. It's only a minute long, but you see the shark come over, and then the camera goes into the shark's mouth, and then they spin the view round to look back out of the shark's mouth at all the other divers, and you just see this kind of frame of divers lying on the ocean floor through the mouth of the shark, and then they spin it round so you can kind of see the gills. But when you watch it, have the sound turned up as well, because the sound is part of the experience. You can just hear this, like, the inner workings of a shark just going and the camera bouncing off the teeth and stuff. And then apparently sharks are attracted to shiny objects, and it's not unusual for them to swallow GoPros and things like that from people who are filming them. But normally they swim off with the camera, and presumably it reappears, somewhere from the other end a few days later. I don't know the digestion of sharks, but this particular one didn't fancy swallowing it, so it spat it out again. So that's how they were able to retrieve the footage. Otherwise, it would have obviously been, long gone. So
I've just watched the video, and it's so cool. These 360 cameras, I don't often see much of a good use for. I mean, I guess if you're doing some sports stuff, that's what they're primarily designed for. But I kind of see a lot of silly footage with them that just doesn't. They're so wide angle. It's a very extreme point of view. But that sort of view, looking straight down the mouth of a shark and then back out again, it visualizes what it would be like to be swallowed by that.
Now, I have a very interesting story about the last time I went diving, which is closely related to this, and it's not very long, so just give me 1 minute to explain it. So I did my PADI diving course out in Australia. This is, 30 years ago now. And once I'd qualified, the next location I went to, which was on the same trip, was in the South Pacific. It was in French Polynesia. And I was driving around and I saw this sign, just like this A-frame outside a building, and it said, "Feed the sharks." And I thought, well, that sounds quite good. So anyway, signed up and went out on this little boat. Obviously, you had to have a PADI qualification to go on this thing, because basically you're diving down to 25 meters. The leader is basically putting on this chain link suit. Okay, so he looks like a knight, right? By the time we get to the location, which is miles out to sea, when we can't see land in any direction now. And I'm looking around this boat, which isn't very big, and I'm thinking, well, where are our chain link suits? Because there were about 8 people in the group. And I said to him, where's our chain link suits? And he said, oh, you won't need them because you're not holding the meat. And he said, all you've got to do is lie on the floor and stay still, and I'm going to wave the meat around, and all the sharks will come around. And if they misjudge anything, it's my hand they're going to bite, not yours. So don't worry about it. You don't need any protection. So I was like, okay, fine. So anyway, we get to the site, drops the anchor, and he says, right, everyone follow me. And I had a bit of a cold at the time. And so everyone was descending down the anchor line, okay, just sort of like going into the abyss down below. And I was the last one down. And I was having trouble equalizing. So as you drop down, obviously the pressure builds, of the water, which affects your ears. And so, to avoid excruciating pain, and I'm talking pain like you wouldn't believe, you have to basically hold your nose and blow. It's called the Valsalva movement, and it equalizes your ears. It equalizes the pressure in your ears. So I'm going down this, getting deeper and deeper down the anchor line, and the pain is building and building and building, and I just can't equalize my ears. And everyone else has just disappeared. And I'm thinking, if I don't go down with them, I'm going to ruin the whole dive, because the dive master's going to have to come back up to get me. Then the whole thing's good. So I was kind of panicking and under a lot of pressure. And I just thought, just blow really hard. That's the only thing you do. So I held my nose. I just blew really hard. And I felt this pop. And I thought, oh, that's better. But then as I took my hand away from my nose, there's just this cloud of blood in the water. Okay, so we're now in the vicinity of sharks, and I'm heavily bleeding from my nose, which isn't the ideal scenario. So the dive master comes back up and is signalling to me with hand gestures, "Are you okay?" And I wasn't really okay, but I'm giving him the thumbs up saying, "Yeah, I'm okay." Because I was under pressure, I didn't want to ruin the dive for everybody. So I'm now lying on the floor, the bleeding's kind of stopped, and the sharks start swimming around. And I'm looking around just to sort of find a nice flat spot. And there's a hole just to my left that kind of goes down into the rock. And I think, oh, look, I wonder what lives in there. At which point, a bloody great eel comes out and bites my hand. Right? So I'm now bleeding from my hand and I've got blood in my mask. And there's loads of kind of like 4 or 5 metre sharks swimming around with this guy waving a Sunday roast around. And so anyway, I survived, as you probably guessed, because I'm here to tell the story. But that was the last time I ever went diving, because I got back in the boat and I just thought, you know what, I didn't enjoy that at all. And there's nothing worse than being down there at the bottom of the ocean, wishing you were up there, you know, above the water, than being up above the water, wishing you were down there.
Well, obviously your story ended well with sharks.
It was longer than a minute, though.
It was definitely longer than a minute.
We can edit it.
It was worth it. I would say it was worth it. The final story we've got in our news section today didn't end quite so well, and it's kind of in the same vein. Harry, what's happened here?
We're sticking with sharks, unfortunately, and it wouldn't be the Photography Online podcast without a selfie story. We always, how do we manage to always find them? I don't know. This is a Canadian lady. I think she was about 55, and she lost both her hands while trying to take a selfie with a shark. So you got off relatively lightly, I think, Marcus. She wasn't even diving. She was wading in the shallows. So, I mean, she's just, up to her knees, I guess, and out in the Caicos Islands. Saw a shark, which had apparently been in the area for about 40 minutes. And not just any shark, I think it was a bull shark, which are big, pretty aggressive sharks.
Sounds bad.
And thought that, well, hey, I'm going to get closer and see if I can get a selfie with this shark. And, of course, the shark attacked her. And she ended up having both hands amputated, one right up to her elbow and the other nearer the wrist. I think her husband tried to stop the shark from biting her again, but just another situation of what are people thinking? Like, have you never watched Discovery Channel Shark Week? I mean,
well, it's just common sense, isn't it? I mean, any animal that can potentially do you harm when you're in its environment, particularly, just don't go up to it and try and take a selfie. I mean, that shouldn't even be a lesson that needs to be taught.
No, and the hands must have been in the water as well, so she's reaching out for it, which it's never going to end well.
Yeah, she was right down trying to get close to it, and I mean, it was a decent sized 6-foot shark, so it wasn't. You wouldn't think it was just like a little baby. You think, oh, look at that cute little shark. I mean, it was a decent. Most people are pretty afraid of, and I don't like demonizing sharks because attacks are actually very rare. You're more likely to be hit by a bolt of lightning, or killed on the road, etc., than actually attacked by a shark.
Yeah, I mean, most sharks are pretty harmless. A little bit like this lady who's now pretty harmless.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Okay. We feel for her and for her family, and please ignore Marcus and Harry. But yeah, that is another selfie-related story. I'll fade off the laughter in the background. And there is links. I mean, there are links. There's stories, obviously, all over about that, and nothing too gory, so don't worry about it. But you can check that out in the show notes, along with links to all the other stories that we've mentioned: the shark eating the camera, the headshots, and the planets, of course, as well. That were visible in the night sky recently. So check those out if you want to. But we are going to move on, I think, to the most exciting part of the podcast, certainly for me anyway. Let's play.
The Photography Online Podcast Quiz.
All right, well, welcome back to the Pop Quiz. That's the Photography Online podcast quiz where I ask our 2 panellists 5 photography-related questions. And you can play along, of course, as well at home, as the answers won't be revealed until the end. Now, Harry won his first quiz, which was last month, so I'm sure he'll be trying to replicate his victory. He did say it was beginner's luck, which I'm not sure he's trying to play it down in case he loses this time or not. Marcus, of course, lost his first 2 quizzes, so let's see if desperation can work to his advantage this time. There will be...
I'm I'm just lulling everyone into a false sense of security, Ruth, before I really kind of turn on the pressure.
Okay, 2 months in a row. Yeah, okay. Well, it's working. I don't know, Harry's probably feeling a bit confident there. 5 rounds, though, everyone worth a point for the correct or closest answer. In the event of a tie, both of you receive the point. The winner gets nothing at all. So, without further ado, let's play.
Round 1. Multiple choice.
All right, well, in this round, I'm going to ask a question which is pretty difficult, and so to help you out, we have put 4 possible answers. All I need you to do is tell me which answer you think is the correct one. Harry's got his concentrating face on there.
Just rolled my sleeves up.
Sleeves are up. Okay, in 1855, James Maxwell took the first colour photograph. What was it of? A tartan ribbon. B, a lady with a pink parasol. C, an elevated view of a small village. Or D, a vase of dried flowers. A, B, C, or D, or the actual items. That's a tartan ribbon, a lady with a pink parasol, an elevated view of a small village, or a vase of dried flowers.
Yeah, I think I know this one.
Okay.
I can immediately discount 2 options through kind of logically thinking about it, so I'm just gonna have to take
because they didn't have elevated views of distant towns in 1855, did they?
Really? Nobody could stand up and look down at something?
Exactly.
Okay, Harry's still thinking about that.
No, I know my. Should I write them down?
If you think you're going to remember or forget, yes, writing it down is not a bad thing. Marcus is confident. He's not even shifted. He's like, you've got no pen or paper going on there. Anyway, okay.
Yeah, it's in my head.
Yeah, 2 answers there then. Okay, let's move on.
Round 2. Name the year.
All right, well, in this round, the answer to the question is a year. The round goes to whoever gets the closest answer. But if either of you gives me the exact year, then you will get a bonus point. And as hinged on bonus points before, in fact, I think Harry won last month through a bonus point. So here is the question. In what year was the first LCD screen added to the back of a camera?
Oh, Lord.
Pain etched in Harry's face. Marcus is his eyes are moving a little bit. It's about as expressive as it gets.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I think it's easy to get the decade right here. So it's just a case of choosing a year at random here, and you got a 10% chance then, haven't you?
Well, if you
more
think,
maths, Jesus.
Yeah, I was going to say it's just. Harry's hair's gone all... You can tell by the state of Harry's hair how much he's thinking about a question. The hands go through, the hair sticks up at various degrees. Marcus could tell us exactly what. You both got an answer? Marcus doesn't look entirely sure.
Well, I'm just trying to think, because it's either late one decade or early in the next decade. So I'm going to go late for the previous decade, and I'm not giving Harry any clues here.
Well, I mean, I know what sort of decade it must be. It's just it's one of those where it's probably different to what your initial reaction's going to be. So yeah, it's just going to be a blank guess, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got my answer anyway.
You've got an answer. Harry's got an answer. Right, let's move on.
Round 3. Artificial intelligence.
All right, well, in this round, I asked ChatGPT to describe a photographic object, a person, or a practice without mentioning the name of the subject. All I need you guys to do is tell me what I asked it to talk about.
This object is a silent intermediary, a hidden force that stretches vision beyond its natural limits. It lingers between the source and the observer, amplifying reach while subtly shifting perception. Though it grants a deeper gaze into the distant or the minuscule, it demands a price, dimming clarity, bending light, and whispering distortions into the image it reshapes.
Complete confusion on Harry's point.
I know what it is.
I've got a guess. I'm just not convinced it's the right one.
I'm 95% confident I know what that is.
All right. Harry, you happy to move on?
Yeah, I'm writing my guess down.
Okay. All right, let's move on.
Round 4. Take a wild guess.
All right, well, as the name suggests of this round, it requires an answer which could be almost anything, so you're unlikely to get it exact, so you will need to take a wild guess. As with round 2, the point will go to whoever gets closest to the answer, and although that's unlikely, if you do get the exact answer, there are 2 bonus points. Here is the question. What was the average income for freelance photographers in the US in 2024?
Oh, blimey. Okay. So the answer needs to be in dollars here,
It does
right?
need to be in
US
dollars, yeah.
So the average
income for a freelance photographer in the United States of America last year.
Okay, so we're not putting anyone in a genre here. They're not like a sports or wedding photographer or anything like that. Just a photographer.
Average photographer, freelance.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah, I've got my figure.
Sure. Yeah, it's just.
There's no point in thinking too hard about it.
You're not writing it down, Marcus?
Well, I don't have a pen. That's the problem.
For goodness sake.
So it's just in my head.
Okay. Right. Fine. Harry, you got something thought through?
Yeah. I've just plucked a number randomly, so I don't think I'm gonna.
It's a
That's
wild
all you can
guess.
do, Harry.
So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on to our final one.
Round 5. Where in the world?
All right, well, this final round, it is as much a geography question as a photography one, but the location will typically be a well-known hotspot for photography. Here is the description. Where in the world? Women were forbidden to climb this mountain until 1872 in case they upset its female deity. It's actually a composite of multiple volcanoes. Some towns have chosen to erect giant banners to stop tourists taking photos. And in 2018, a popular YouTube star promoted outrage by filming a suicide victim in a forest at its base. You both look very happy and confident.
I know that one, yeah.
Yeah, you do know that one, I'm sure. We have mentioned it on the podcast a few times. All right, you guys ready to go over the answers?
I'm ready to beat Marcus. Let's do this.
All right.
No, I'm going to win this one, Harry. I reckon I've got a full house here.
Oh, right. Okay. Round 1. The question was the first colour photograph. What was it of? We had A, B, C, or D. Tartan ribbon, lady with a pink parasol, elevated view of a small village, or a vase of dried flowers. Harry.
Well, so I discounted the pink parasol and the elevated view of a village as potential choices because I don't think they would have done the first picture outside. They would have done it in a controlled setting. But I don't think a parasol would have been the chosen subject of an 1850s man. So that left me with either A or D, and I just went for the ribbon because it probably had lots of different colours on it. It would have made a good subject to shoot.
A tartan ribbon.
Yeah.
Okay, right, Ruth. I reckon it's the parasol.
Okay, you reckon it was B. Harry is bang on. It was the tartan ribbon. Your reaction makes that so much better.
Come on, a tartan ribbon. I thought that,
No, it was a tartan ribbon.
Where was this photo taken? In the Highlands of Scotland?
As Harry said, it was taken in a controlled environment, and obviously he looked for something that had lots of colours in it. He chose a tartan ribbon. I don't know where he got it. Maybe it was from his wife. There was a picture of a lady with a pink parasol. It wasn't the first one.
That's the one I've got in my head. Yeah, it's a very well-known photo.
So all 4 of those were photographs at some point, but no, Harry was bang on the money there. So well done, Harry. No full house.
Are you sure? Are you sure about this, Ruth?
Marcus, you can go and open your encyclopedia, or you can Google it.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to do. That is the correct answer. It was James Maxwell. I should just okay, tartan ribbon, 3-colour process. This was what it was: the red, green, and blue. It was suggested by James Maxwell, and a few years later, that first image was taken, 1861, by Thomas Hutton. There's lots of technical information.
I'm looking at it right
online.
now. Yeah,
there you go.
It's a terrible photograph.
It's not a good photograph, but it is colour and it is a tartan ribbon. So
I reckon Harry googled that when you were asking the question.
Oh, he's taking it badly. He's taking this badly.
You can check the video. I've just typed it right now. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Okay. Excellent. This is brilliant. Okay.
Right,
round
I've got some
2.
coming back to do.
Yeah, you do. Round 2. The question was: in what year was the first LCD screen added to the back of a camera? What do we reckon? Marcus, you can go first.
Okay, so it was either the 1970s or 1980s. They're the two things. But you see, this is unfair because Harry might have gone 1952.
See, now, Marcus,
and he'll be thinking,
you started off saying how confident you had a full house. Now you're immediately, before you even give the answer, backing down. Okay, go for it.
Okay, so... but by the end of the 80s, LCDs were definitely 100% on cameras. So we know, I know that. It's just when they appeared. So I originally, when you asked the question, I was going to go late 70s. But thinking about it, I'm not so sure that would have been the case. So I'm going to go early 80s. I'm going to go for 1983. Okay.
Harry?
Oh, wow. Well, I'm very different because my initial reaction would have been like I knew digital cameras would have been around... relatively early, but I thought, well, screens might not have actually appeared until almost early 2000s.
I should maybe add an extra bit into this. Okay, what year was the first LCD screen added to the back of a digital camera?
Oh,
Maybe that's
come
a word.
on.
Okay, I'm giving you a chance. Okay, I'll give you an extra 10 seconds.
Right,
I'll give you an extra 10 seconds.
Because I would have had cameras with LCD screens, were film cameras in the early 90s. So,
Okay, I'm giving you an extra 10 seconds or so.
talk about a curved ball to ruin my confidence.
I'm sorry. You're right. I missed an important word out there, and you could have blamed that on it. So I didn't want that happening.
Giving him the excuses, honestly.
Yeah, I know. Harry, do you have an answer?
I do, but I'm not going to say it until he's made his choice now. I don't want to influence
All right, well,
him,
I've got to go later then in that case. So I'm going to add 6 years onto that and go 1989.
Okay.
I've gone for 1996. I just thought sometime in the 90s, digital starting to appear. I know it wasn't mainstream until more into the noughties, so I just think that must have been some of the first prototypes almost. So
Okay,
96.
1995. So, congratulations again, Harry. I mean, Marcus...
This is just unfair.
Unfair. He's right in that there was small LCD panels that gave kind of digital numbers and things earlier on than that. But in terms of the first LCD screen on a digital camera that was used to frame things, it was 1995.
I assumed that's what you were talking about,
Yeah.
Ruth, so I interpreted correctly.
You did. But I didn't want to give Marcus an excuse. It was the Casio QV10, and it did add it in 95. It was 1.8 inches wide. I think my earliest camera was, they were so small, weren't they, back then? But anyway, 2-0 thus far.
Unbelievable.
Which I'm feeling quite good about. Okay, round 3 was artificial intelligence. I wanted you to describe what ChatGPT was trying to describe to us. It was a photographic object, subject, or person. What do we think it was? Now, you were both pretty confident on this, so what do you reckon?
Harry can go first, though.
Well, yeah, I wasn't. That one was tricky. Like, I wrote down remote, because it was talking about something that increases your reach. I thought, standing away from the camera. But then it talked about dispersing the light and changing the quality. So there's got to be some sort of teleconverter between the lens and the camera. So something like that.
Yeah, that's what I've gone for, teleconverter.
Okay, you're both right. That was what it was.
I was pretty confident about that.
I'm glad I crossed out my initial.
Harry, if you'd listened to the podcasts, you'd know we've done a remote control before, so we wouldn't have done that one.
That serves me right for not listening to the podcast then.
Can we not have a rule where we have to accept your first answer?
He was just explaining his thought process before we got to the end of it.
I didn't change it. See,
this is a conspiracy.
This is why I'm writing it down.
Yeah, okay, round 4 was take a wild guess. So we just need closest to what you reckon the average income was for a US freelance photographer in 2024, so last year.
Okay, I'll go first, 44,000.
Okay, Harry?
I went for 50k. I just thought I thought it couldn't be dissimilar to the average sort of wage in the UK, which I don't know was like £35,000. So I just converted that to roughly into dollars and picked a number.
Okay, Marcus actually $45,000.
Oh,
so that was pretty good. That's close.
I've got to get a half a bonus point.
No, you do not.
Absolutely
that was closest. Bang on, you get the extra point. You get a single
at least
point.
it's not a whitewash.
So hang on. So no, we got one more round to go, and it's 3-2.
We've got one more round to go. It is 3-2 at the moment. So it all hinges on this round 5. Where in the world?
So I can't win, can I? But I can draw.
That's correct. Yes.
And I don't care about winning. I just care about him losing. So,
Okay.
All right. We asked you to.
I think we both know
figure
this one.
out. Yeah, where in the world I was talking about. So I'm not going to repeat the question. Where do you reckon it was, Marcus?
I think it's Mount Fuji.
Harry.
Fuji, yeah.
Okay.
It was the only bit of it was the very last bit of the description that got it for me, and the famous YouTuber that filmed a guy in the forest.
YouTuber, okay. What was it for you, Marcus? You're both correct. That was the answer. What ticked it off for you?
Well, I narrowed it down to 2 before we even got to that bit. I was either going to go Kilimanjaro or Fuji, and then when you mentioned about erecting the billboards to stop people photographing it, it's not going to be Kilimanjaro, is it?
So we've talked about this before.
Yeah, I remember those news stories, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so final scores, 4 to Harry, 3 to Marcus.
This is unbelievable. Come on.
You can't...
how can I lose with a score of 3?
I know. Well, I know it hasn't been that bad before, but 4-3. So Harry's on a roll. Harry so far, I think, is our biggest winner. Yeah, reigning champion.
Although I might put in a steward's inquiry for the misinformation on the
I gave you the
LCD
extra
question.
information and I gave you time to think about it. So
Yeah, you got like egg bonus time. Yeah, that's...
No, but I was panicked. I was under pressure. It was a curveball.
Right, okay, I reckon we should do a year-long podcast. I'll just keep scores, basically, of who's winning. At the moment, Harry, it's easy, we're only 4 months in. Marcus is the biggest loser by far. So even without the kind of incentive of any sort of prize, it seems to be working quite well.
Are you insinuating that I'm just the biggest loser, irrespective of the competition?
I'm saying nothing, Marcus. These are your own words.
Thanks.
Let us know how you guys got on as well. If you're playing at home, if you did better than Harry or worse, possibly, than Marcus, do get in touch and let us know. You can email podcast@mc2photography.com or, of course, comment on whatever platform you are listening on. We will be back next month with a brand new set of questions and a couple of new panellists as well.
The Photography Online Podcast, in partnership with Kingjoy Tripods.
Well, we are excited to have Kingjoy helping us make this year's shows possible. We have talked about it before, but we all use Kingjoy's products, so we're really happy to have them supporting the podcast. Harry, last month, was explaining all about his camouflage tripod, which no one has actually ever seen him with. This month, Marcus, I believe you want to tell us about the travel tripod that you take around with you.
Yeah, so obviously I use some heavy duty tripods in my everyday workload, but when I'm traveling, I want to travel with something a little bit lighter. So I use a model that's known as the A83, which is a carbon fiber lightweight tripod. It has a center column, which is removable, but because it has the center column, there has to be a gap between all three legs when they're closed to give that center column a space. So to make the tripod even smaller, Kingjoy then came out with a C83, which doesn't have a center column, and that allows the legs to be positioned much closer to each other. So it's great for traveling because you can put it in a suitcase. It doesn't take up so much space. But then, of course, you don't have the convenience of having a center column. But now they've come out with another model, which is the C83S, which does have a center column, but the center column is specially shaped so that it kind of fits around the other three legs. So the legs are still really close together, and the center column is kind of like, it's almost like a triangle, but each side is concaved, so it kind of wraps around the legs. And again, you can remove it if you don't want it, but it's just there if you do want it. So this is a brand new sort of product, which I'm quite excited to replace my original tripod with. And I think we're going to be giving away one on the show next month.
Yeah, indeed we are. Next month's podcast, we will be giving away a C83S tripod. It is worth £425. So if you fancy adding that, what we believe is the best performing travel tripod to your kit, do make sure to listen to find out how you can win it next month. And if you want to know what else is available in the Kingjoy professional lineup, do check out the Photography Online shop if you're here in the UK, or you can of course go online to kingjoy.com for international sales or to find out your nearest dealer. All right, well, let's move on.
Listeners from an unlikely location.
Yeah, we like to say hello to listeners from unexpected parts of the world who are tuning in every month. We enjoy looking at the map and seeing where all the downloads have occurred. We find ourselves amazed, actually, at some locations, such as Vietnam, which always rates quite high. So, is it Xin Shao? Marcus, you should know this. How do you say it?
Well, I've been to Vietnam, but I can't remember how to... I probably didn't say hello to anyone, to be honest, when I was there.
That's probably fair. I think it's Xin Shao, if you're listening in Vietnam. Somewhere, though, that's popped up for the first time is Bhutan, which I had to actually look up on the map to see just exactly where it was. It's in the eastern Himalaya. It's nestled between China and India. It's got a population of less than 750,000 people, one of which did listen to our podcast last month. So hello to you. Now, I have a question, guys. Do either of you know, well, A, where it is, I just told you, B, the capital of Bhutan? Quick additional question for you.
Only because I can see it written down in front of me, but I didn't know. Which is I know Bhutan. I've been sort of near to the border, but I've always wanted to go. It's very cool. So
yeah,
an isolated
someone
place.
listening over there. Thimphu, Thimphu, I think is what you pronounce it. The capital of Bhutan. The language is Dzongkha, which is again probably mispronounced. Hello, I believe hello is Kuzuzangpala. And I was listening earlier on a YouTube video to try and say that right. So whoever's listening in Bhutan, Kuzuzangpala to you. But wherever you're listening from, you're always so welcome. We're really glad to have you as part of our worldwide audience. Do get in touch. Let us know about yourself. We're always interested in who and where you're listening from. As I said, you can email podcast@mc2photography.com, or you can, of course, leave a comment on whatever platform you're listening on. We do have quite a few comments actually came in regarding the podcast last month. This is from Leica Guy. He says, another great podcast. Your praise of Think Tank is well placed in my opinion. We talked about Think Tank bags last month. He said, I've got 2 Think Tank shoulder bags which not only have the usual shoulder length strap, but they've got a short removable strap for hand carry. I removed one and of course I lost it. I went to their website hoping they had a replacement. Not seeing one, I got in touch to see if it would be possible to buy the strap. They asked for my address. 2 days later, a replacement arrived, no charge. So, like a guy, very impressed with Think Tank. Mike Faulkner got in touch by email. This is for you, Harry. He said, I couldn't agree more with your comments last month on the quality of SanDisk products. I worked in electronic retail for over 30 years. SanDisk used to be a premier brand and I always recommended them. I left the industry 15 years ago, and when I took up photography a couple of years ago, SanDisk were my choice of memory card and SSD drive for my Lightroom catalogue. Last year, a SanDisk card disintegrated in my R5 and damaged the card slot, and I had 2 SSD drives fail. I swapped the first one as I was assured by SanDisk that it was rare for SSD drives to go faulty. All through this time, I was assured by SanDisk of the quality of their products. I'm glad you have publicised their issues as it may prompt them to get some real quality control. Love the podcast and the show. Sorry for the rant. And that, of course, if you weren't listening last month, we had some new gear from SanDisk, which there was rather scathing feedback on, I think, from Harry and James. So go back and listen to that. DST UK, just regarding the podcast in general, he says, once you get over the presenter's photography fundamentalism, that there is just one way of taking photographs, manual everything, preferably film, definitely no Photoshop. This is very enjoyable. I disagree with virtually all of Marcus's opinions, so I love it. I love it. When he's
join
on.
the club, yeah.
Yeah, Ruth's a great anchor and the team have created a radio quality production, so thank you, DST UK, for that. Lots of people enjoying the show last month, not the podcast, the main photography online show, in particular the eyeballing exposure feature that we did in our Analog Affairs section. It was part 1 of 2. LGB fan Mark says, thanks again for this episode, especially about exposure. I love how you guys teach the basics of photography. Looking forward to the exposure walk, and a suggestion, Marcus, maybe for a future topic. He says, have Marcus do a composition walk at a new scene for him to talk us through the process in your mind of arriving at a scene, picking a subject and working from there with a final result. So maybe an idea for a future episode, but thank you, Mark, for getting in touch. Michelle said, excellent show, thank you. I would definitely like to learn to judge EV, a new little game for me, I think. Make my own estimate, then check with the Light Meter app on my phone. We'll see how I get on. And I was talking on the live show for our Photography Online official supporters last month. This is what I do when I'm out with James and Marcus as well when I'm out and about. I point at a scene and say, tell me the exposure, and then double check it on my camera, and yeah, usually they are pretty accurate to within half a stop even sometimes. So that was a really popular feature. If you haven't seen it, really useful as well, go back and check it out. And as we said on the live show, it is part 1 of 2, so if you can't quite wrap your head around the first part, because there's a lot of information there, the second part, which is coming out on the April show, which should be out today if you're listening on the first day the podcast comes out, it'll all come together, all start to make sense.
Yeah, and if you haven't already seen it, I do have a bit of a disaster.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There's a disaster that happens. It all goes wrong. Okay,
well, that's always enjoyable. So do check that out. And we do always appreciate your feedback. Do keep it coming. All right, well, let's move on to our gear section.
It may be new. It may even be exciting. But does the world really need it?
All right, well, we are talking gear. We've got some big releases this month. Now, sometimes we end up discussing gadgets and lens cloth because that's pretty much all we can find new to the market that month. But this month, all cameras and lenses pretty much. So we're going to be a little bit more succinct than usual because there's quite a few cameras and things come out. We do want to talk about a few of them. So we're going to start off, Marcus, with a brand new release from Sigma, which isn't a lens, and it's quite exciting. So tell us about this.
Yeah, well, it's certainly unusual. So Sigma have just released a brand new sort of concept camera, I guess, which is called the BF. So the Sigma BF. Now,
best friend, boyfriend.
Well, actually, do you know what BF stands for, Harry?
Not a clue.
Beautiful thing.
Is that actually it?
No, I'm just joking. Apparently it stands for beautiful foolishness, which is a well-known kind of like or traditional phrase in Japanese culture. something to do with tea ceremonies or something, but it's one of those things that
with tea
probably
ceremonies?
doesn't translate. Yeah, apparently it's some well-known phrase in a tea ceremony book, and it just describes the process, and it's kind of been transferred over to other aspects in Japanese culture, where if something's exquisite, they call it BF. I don't know, but it doesn't translate very well into English, does it? But putting the name aside, it's a new compact digital camera, 24 megapixels full frame, which is good. Uses the L-mount lenses, which means that you can put the new Leica mirrorless lenses on it, as well as all the Sigma lenses. The idea of the camera is basically just to strip everything back to the basics, forget about all the nonsense that's kind of you find on most digital cameras these days. So if you look at this camera, it's incredibly simplistic, but that's what makes it so attractive. The front of the camera has nothing on it whatsoever, no buttons, nothing, so it's just completely blank. The top only has a shutter button and a couple of little holes which are mics basically to pick up audio for video. It doesn't have a memory card, so it's only got internal memory, so there's no cards to be taken in and out. The internal memory is 230 gigabytes, so it's fairly sizable. I can't see that you need more than that, basically. There's no mic or headphone jack on it. They've removed everything, basically. But that's the beauty of it. It's just simple. It's got 3 buttons on the back and a control dial, and that's pretty much it. But they've just gone for the simple quality over, all the sort of gadgets and bells and whistles, which I think is a great thing.
One person I saw said they were struggling to find the on button. It took them a long time to actually switch it on. But apart from
there's only 3 buttons on the back. I mean, you've got a 33% chance. Just try them all, and sooner or later it will turn on.
I think it was like a press and hold or something. I don't know. Anyway, it's a beautiful looking thing. Lots of people talking about it. It's like if Apple made a digital camera, this is what it would look like.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, I had this down as something that you would buy, Ruth.
I would. And my dream is to find a small compact camera, a full frame that just does a wonderful job. And obviously Sigma's lenses are world class. If you can get a small body like that does the job, and like you say, stripped back, simplistic, doesn't have all the faff, don't need video, just stills. I think it does do video. I can't remember, but
it does do video.
Yeah.
It does do video. It does up to proper slow motion 120 frames per second video, which is quite impressive for such a compact.
What makes this camera unusual is that it's milled from a single piece of alloy. So there's no parts to it in terms, they're not screwed together or glued together like most cameras would be. So because it's milled from a single piece of metal, do you know how many they can make in a day, Harry?
Is it kind of handmade? They're all doing it, or is it all sort of automatic machines?
Well, it has to be done on a special machine, which basically, hollows out a single block of metal. And obviously it takes time to do that because it has to, be rotated and chiseled out and, drilled and what have you. But it's all done automatically. There's not, it's not like a sweatshop of kids with files and drills.
Well, you've got to be in tens or at least 50, 60, 100 cameras a day because they've got to, it's...
9. That's how many they can make. In 24 hours, they can make 9 cameras that can come out of that factory. So, they're not going to be flooding the market until a few months down the road. But if you're interested in buying one, they're just shy of £2,000, so £1,969.
It's not bad, is it?
It would be similar in dollars. It's not bad considering that you don't have to buy a memory card. And there's no accessories that you're gonna have to buy for this thing. So it's good.
But if you were out on the hill and you took a photograph and you hadn't downloaded them for ages and suddenly you ran out, you're screwed, aren't you? You can't just put a new memory card in. You can't just get rid of what's there. Well, you could do a mass delete, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the same as your phone, isn't it? You tend to not delete photos from your phone until one day you wake up and your phone stops working, and it's because it's run out of memory, and then you have to panic and go through and delete all the stuff that you never intended to take anyway. But yeah, I think that's probably just a user issue. You just have to use this camera in a different way to what you'd use another camera. All
right, well, link to that if you want to check it out, what it looks like, in the show notes as usual. We've got another camera, Harry, that's just come onto the market. What's this one?
Well, this is the new Panasonic Lumix S1R2. This is going back to our thing about camera names, isn't it?
Give it a name, come on.
I preferred Beautiful Foolishness, to be honest.
Yeah, just call it Bob, or this is the Panasonic Dave. This is an updated, and I think I used the previous or one of the first iterations of these S1 cameras in one of the very first shows, right in the back in the first season, I believe. It was a...
I remember it well.
Yeah, it was a large megapixel camera. And when I used it, the quality out of the camera was fantastic. They sent me a couple of lenses with it, but the sort of the longest lens that was available for it at that time was just a 70-200. And the focus was all right, but I had a little bit of difficulty dealing with sort of trying to photograph the otters that I was shooting with it, but great for landscape. So this is an updated version of that camera, 44 megapixels, full frame, but with lots of advancements to the focus system, lots of inbuilt video features. It's geared as a hybrid camera for stills and content creators, video shooters. So it's got some very impressive video specs as well as being able to shoot at 40 frames per second, which is more than my Canon R5, still more than the R5 Mark II. It also has the new pre-capture shooting that most cameras are coming out with now. And again, it's actually sounds like a better version than I've got on my Canon at the moment. On the Canon, I think I can only do half a second pre-shooting. There's no option to alter the duration or the settings or anything like that. But this is a 1.5 second pre-burst for images, which gives you far more flexibility. It sounds like it's a bit more customizable.
I think safety net is the word you're looking for, Harry. It gives you a bigger safety net.
Yes, sure.
To compensate for your lack of talent in able to get the shot in the first place.
But there's also some good, say the video features are if that's what you need out of a single camera, then those are pretty enticing as well in terms of being able to shoot ProRes video, open gate video as well. And so it actually looks like a pretty decent upgrade. And because of the mounts that it's got now, it's the collaborative mount, Panasonic, Leica and Sigma. You can use it with a huge selection of lenses. I don't know how many there are now. It must be 50, 60 different lenses now that are sort of spread out across this.
Yeah, so it's the same lenses that the Sigma BF
exactly
uses. So you could have a BF and a Panasonic S1 Mark II hokey dokey, whatever it's called, and share the lenses across both cameras.
Yeah, there's
you know what I think is the biggest downside of this camera, and it might be the best camera in the world in terms of features and performance, but its Achilles heel is the fact that it's Panasonic. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but I have a Panasonic microwave and a Panasonic vacuum cleaner. So when you ask a photographer what brand of camera do you shoot, you just don't expect them to come back and say Panasonic, do you?
That is true. It's not. I mean, we run lots of workshops and trips, and it's not often that you get somebody arriving going, "I shoot on Panasonic." It's quite unusual, and I think that's a shame because
when they do say that, Harry, even though it's completely what's the word I'm looking for, unjustified. You kind of, in your head, you're kind of thinking, oh, well, they're not a serious photographer because they've got a Panasonic. It's like if they said, I shoot a Hasselblad, or I shoot a Fuji, or I shoot a Nikon, or I shoot a Canon. You kind of like think, okay, well, maybe this person knows what they're talking about. But as soon as they say Panasonic, it's a bit like someone saying Pentax, unless it's a film camera. Then you kind of think, okay, well, yeah, they probably don't really know what they're doing. But that's totally unjustified, and I'm not, but that's how we think. Would you agree?
It's a shame because I think it's a decent, or more than a decent camera, and I wouldn't mind giving it a go and playing about with especially some of the new lenses that are available on the Mount Alliance, because there's some good choices now.
Yeah. All
right. Well, a final camera release we've got for the gear section this month is one that is quite exciting to me. It's kind of on a similar vein of the first one we talked about, the Fuji GFX 100 RF. What are we calling this one?
Well, no, I think RF, it's got to be Ralph.
Okay. So the Fuji Ralph had just been announced, and tell us about it, Marcus, because again, it's quite an exciting one.
Yeah, so this is the latest in the GFX kind of line of cameras. So it's 102 megapixels, so you're not lacking anything there in resolution. Lots of people are calling it a medium format camera, but as we've previously discussed, it's not really medium format. It's just larger than full frame. But what's impressive is it only weighs 735 grams. And bearing in mind, this is a fixed lens camera, so you can't remove the lens. So that includes the weight of the lens as well. So if you're listening in the US, that's 1.6 pounds. I mean, that's nothing really for a camera. I mean, I don't know, do you know the weight of your camera body alone, Harry? Your R5?
I mean, it's got to be at least that 800 grams just for the camera alone, and that's before you stick a great big lens on it. So significantly heavier.
Exactly, and this is a bigger sensor. I mean, let's, for argument's sake, let's just call it medium format, even though we know it's not. So it's a medium format fixed lens camera, which is basically just designed as a point and shoot. Basically, there's no zoom on it or anything. It comes with a 35mm f4 lens, which in full frame terms is equivalent to 28mm. So it's reasonably wide angle. I mean, it's a beautiful looking camera. I don't know if you've seen a photo of it, but it's very stylish, and Fuji do make cameras that look stylish. I mean, that's one thing they do probably better than anybody else. And this is right up there with, beautiful looking cameras. It's got 2 SD card slots. Actually, Harry, I was going to ask you about this. Do you remember, 3-4 years ago, there was this kind of move over to lots of very high performing different types of cards? I mean, because I'm not a digital shooter, I never really knew what they were, but you'll know what the really expensive high performing cards were that were really fast read and write speeds.
It's just all the new versions of compact flash essentially. So Canon, the Panasonic, for example, use the CF Express Type B. So it's just like a truncated, a squashed version of a compact flash card, and super fast.
But aren't they really expensive?
They're pretty pricey. I mean, I just bought a 1 terabyte CF Express Type B card, and it was hundreds. You can easily spend a lot of money.
Right.
But I mean, SD still has got a big place, and they have upgraded SD cards now. There's the new V90 style SD cards, which are also relatively high performing. But it totally depends on what you need to do.
Yeah.
If you're shooting vast amounts of video, and you're shooting it as raw video, uncompressed video, 8K, all the rest of it, then you're not going to be doing it onto an SD card. But for most people, SD cards are absolutely fine, even for big resolution cameras.
This is my point in case here, is that this has got 2 SD card slots and it's a 102 megapixel camera. So that to me is music to my ears, because it means that people aren't forced to then go out and have to spend hundreds more on expensive memory cards, because I think I'm right in saying that there have been cameras out before which haven't had SD card slots, and so you spend a few £1,000s on a camera, and then you're forced to go and spend £400 on a memory card, which because it doesn't take SD cards, whereas this one does. So, and there's something that's going to be attractive to you here, Ruth, for this camera. It comes with a rope-style shoulder strap.
Thanks for that, but
they're going for that kind of hipster, kind of cool and sort of trendy look with the rope strap, and that's the kind of thing that I'm not being funny here, but if you walked into a camera shop, and you were trying to decide between 2 cameras,
it is true,
and one had a rope strap and one had a flat shoulder strap, I reckon you'd go for the rope strap. Whether it be consciously or subconsciously, because it's just your type of thing.
The camera itself is a beautiful looking camera. I mean, in terms of price, because obviously the one we talked about at the beginning, the Sigma BF, is only about £2,000. This one's quite a lot more expensive than that. What's this?
Yeah, so this one is £4,699, or just shy of $5,000.
That's pricey.
And so when you compare it to the Sigma BF, you're looking at over double the price and half again, basically. And the only real advantage is that you're getting a larger sensor, but it's not 2.5 times the sensor size. So for me, it's not good value. But I've always said that about medium formats. Once you get bigger than full frame, you end up paying a lot more money for not a lot more sensor. And personally, I don't think it's worth it. But some people would disagree.
You're into kind of Leica range for a nice fixed lens, compact style camera, and I think I would prefer a Leica than this medium format. Just kind of putting it out there, but I mean, it looks lovely. But the lens is only f4, and I know that's not the end of the world. It totally depends on what you're going to shoot. But
the fact that it's an f4 and 35mm means that you're never going to be able to get those shallow depth of field.
And that's kind of, if I'm shooting on a little fixed lens camera, I kind of want to be able to do really nice, stylish portrait type shots, travel snaps, and it's not going to give me the result that I would want. So
basically what this is, Harry, it's a digital version of a Texas Leica, which I've given you a copy of there.
Yeah, I've got it in my hand here, and I mean this. It's a heck of a lot bigger than this new Fuji must be. I mean, this is actual medium format rather than
Okay, but so that the film size of that is 4 times bigger. And I know the camera's bigger and it's heavier and everything, but I'd just rather use that camera than this new one. And I love this camera. Don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of the camera. I think it looks beautiful. It take very, very high quality photos. But the one thing that I kind of worries me, the way they're going, is that it's got a fixed lens, but they kind of seem to be, in the advertising, they seem to be pushing the fact that you can crop in afterwards to simulate different focal lengths. So it's got a 35mm lens on it, but with cropping you can go to 50mm and even up to 85mm. But that's not really the point here, is it? And once we start thinking about that, it just leads to bad practice, because it just leads people to think, well, I don't need to buy longer lenses, I can just crop in all the time. And it's just not the right frame of mind, really.
So does the world need it? What do we reckon?
I think there's a place for it. There's no other camera with a sensor of that size. It will be popular, but it doesn't appeal to me. But yeah, I think there's a place for it.
Harry?
I'm going to say no.
Sure.
Yeah, I just they say it's kind of sitting in a niche that's kind of being occupied by a lot of other nice cameras and that offer, I think, better value. So I don't think it quite hits the mark. I like the idea of making sort of medium format. I mean, I like Fuji's way of describing it, which is more than full frame. I think that's what
that's perfect. That fine. I reckon they've listened to one of our previous.
Because that's the way
podcasts.
They advertise their medium format stuff now. It's kind of that there.
Because I've always said it should be called super full frame, because it's not medium format. It's not even getting close to medium format.
They seem to have changed their tune on it a little bit, and they're going down the line of more than full frame and making it accessible and lighter, and
which I cannot argue with at all. And I think that it's good that they do that.
No, not for me.
All right, well, not for you. If you want to crop in old school, we do have a couple of new lens releases as well, just come out from Sigma. Starting off, Harry, with something I reckon be right up your street. What's the first one?
It is. I saw this get released, and it looks like a fantastic lens. This is the Sigma 300 to 600 millimeter f4 sport lens, and available for the Sigma, the L mount that we were talking about earlier, and for Sony as well. So I'm most gutted about is that it's not going to be coming to my full frame Canon anytime soon. Which is...
Well, yeah, I mean, it's all to do with Canon releasing the rights for them to make it.
Yeah, it'll happen eventually, but this looks like a fantastic lens. It is, 300 to 600, and I shoot often with a 300mm on my Canon, a prime lens, and I stick a 2x converter on it. But I was in Africa over the winter, and I would be often having to take the converter on and off, just to vary my focal length a little bit. And being able to have this and have that flexibility to go from 300 to 600 at a great aperture for wildlife photography at f4. It's a big lens. There's no getting away from that. But I don't think you can use that as a sort of negative for a lens like this. You can't have telephoto focal lengths on full frame cameras and have something that's the size of a pencil on the front of your camera. It just doesn't work like that. So highly impressive. I'd be really interested to see the performance in terms of focus and whatnot.
Well, we can get one, Harry. We'll get one on loan, and you can take it on a trip and maybe do a review about it, because I think that this is a fantastic lens, because the way I see it, it's a 600mm f4 lens that you can zoom out on, which I think is fantastic. And the price, I mean, okay, it's not a cheap lens because it's about £6,000, probably similar in US dollars. Yeah. But if you compare it to, say, a Canon 600mm f4, it's about half price.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
and you can zoom out. So, I mean, it's a no-brainer. If the quality's there and the performance is there, then for me, that makes it worth every single penny.
It looks like an absolute winner, and but you kind of compare it to, because it has been a bumper month for releases, and Sony have also released their own new telephoto lens, which was the 400 to 800, which I think is really sort of the main competitor. If you're shooting on Sony or Sigma or Panasonic and you're looking at different lenses, but if you're on Sony, you've got the choice of the 300 to 600 or the 400 to 800, and they're both relatively similar, long focal lengths, zooming. They're both internally zooming, so it means that when you do zoom in or out, the barrel isn't moving in or out, and that's a massive plus point for me. It makes the lens less visually obvious to wildlife. It's better for video shooting and not unbalancing your setup. However, the Sony lens, rather than being fixed to f4, is f6.3 to f8, so not quite as good in terms of aperture. However, I mean, for me personally, I've shot with an 800mm f11 lens for my Canon fixed, and unless it's super gloomy in the winter here, it's actually I don't mind having to shoot at those higher ISOs. It's not a good argument these days. So there are actually two really fantastic lenses that are available on that Sony. Now, the Sony, the 400 to 800 is significantly cheaper. We're looking at about £2,500 for that at the moment. So less than half the price of the Sigma. So if I was on Sony, it would be quite a tough choice at the moment. Which of those I would be looking at buying next?
Yeah, so you get extra length with the Sony, but a lot more light with the Sigma.
Yeah.
Does the world need it? What do we reckon?
I think so. Yes, to both those lenses. Yeah, really good choices.
Big green tick.
Big green tick from Marcus and Harry. Sigma have released a second lens with a super wide range. Marcus, tell us about this one.
Yeah, so this is the Sigma 16 to 300mm f3.5 to 6.7. It's only available for APS cropped sensors, but it's got a huge zoom range. So it's over an 18 times zoom range from 16mm up to 300. So in full frame equivalent, that's 24 to 450. So basically, this is the only lens
you'll
need.
ever need. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because you're going from wide angle there to pretty decent telephoto. So you could take this on a safari trip and do landscapes and wildlife all on the same lens. So it's not that expensive. It's £600. So at the long end, that's only £2 per millimeter.
Wow.
It's slightly more. It's £37.50 at the short end. So if you're looking for a bargain, use this lens at the long end. It's available in the L mount for cameras that we've already been speaking about, the Sony E mount, and the Canon RF mount. So if you've got a Canon, cropped sensor camera, then this lens is available. And yeah, I think that this is great. It's just because how many times, Harry, do we get asked the question, what's the best all-round lens? And there's never really an answer for it, is there? Because there's always a downside, whereas I'm not saying there's not a downside to this lens, but there's probably less downsides to it than any other lens.
I mean, I would assume that it's probably not sort of weather sealed and dust sealed for example, at that kind of price range, you're not expecting professional weather sealing. So you would have to be careful if you're in a really, horribly, I suppose, dusty environment. But, so as Ruth mentioned, I'm on my way to Namibia next, when this podcast goes out, and so I'm looking at my sort of lens choices to take with me. I'm quite restricted on what I can carry out on the plane, and so I'm thinking, right, do I want my wide angle? Do I want telephoto? And really, I want to cover everything from kind of that 24 and maybe slightly wider through to kind of quite telephoto for maybe a potential bit of wildlife in the desert. And so I'm looking at that lens thinking now, going, that would be, if I had a crop sensor Canon camera, that would be perfect just to have as a little second camera and a lens just slung over my shoulder to quickly snap on. That's something I would definitely look at picking up, especially for that price.
And if it does end up getting water in it or dust in it, it's not the end of the world, because you can just go and buy another one at that price.
Yeah, we're all loaded here at Photography Online, obviously. Anyway, going to something completely different, coming away from cameras and lenses. This is a tripod, but a tripod with a substantial difference, Harry. Now, I mean, when you first look at this, the inclination is just to kind of dismiss it and mock it. But having watched the video, and I'm sure you have as well, well, first of all, tell us what it is and your thoughts on it.
Well, this is called the Pocket Tripod Pro version 2. So that there was an older version. This is the updated one that I think it's just finished on Kickstarter, actually, as a project. And I did exactly what you just said, Ruth. I looked at it, at the link for this, and thought, what a load of absolute nonsense. This is just one of those really ridiculous things that we definitely don't need. And then I thought, well, I better just do my due diligence. And I read all the information. I had a look at what it was all about. And I tell you what, after a good sort of 10, 15 minutes sort of looking at it and thinking about it, and I better describe it, it's a little, literally the size of a credit card. I think it weighs about 11 grams. So, well, I don't know what that is in ounces. You have to convert it for you Americans. It's very, very light. You wouldn't notice it if it was literally in your wallet to carry around. And you can fold it out, and it has a little slot and a holder that holds your phone in place really firmly. And what it allows you to do is actually tilt your phone up and down, and use that as a little support for your phone while on the go. So I don't know, if you've been in that situation where you've been trying to take a selfie, take a picture of a group of people and try and balance your phone on a rock or on your bag while out somewhere, and inevitably it falls or you drop it or something. And I certainly know that's something that I've done. Or even I've been trying to take a time lapse on my phone, for example, and having to try and prop it up on a rock up on top of a mountain. And this little thing would solve that problem. It has a little thread on the bottom. You can attach that onto tripods or other tripod accessories, so you can set it up on something like a little mini tripod while you're out as well.
So you can set up a tripod on top of a tripod. Excellent.
Yeah, it's like almost like a mini tripod head. But again, if you're only using your phone, and for the price, I think it's something in the region of £35. It's because it's Kickstarter, it might change a little bit once it actually comes out.
But it is only for phones, right?
Well, if you're using something like a GoPro, a little action camera, webcam at home, it's all basically hackable. You could use other smaller systems on it, but certainly not for an actual camera system, a mirrorless camera or anything like that. It's not substantial enough, but it's not designed for that. It is designed as a phone support while you're traveling out on the go, to be fast and lightweight. So
one of the things I quite like about it is like you say, you get ones that just hold phones these days. This one actually, you can tilt it forwards and backwards to quite an extent. And it's designed for that, so you can angle it the way you want. People are talking about, using it. You can fix it somehow to the hot shoe on the camera, and if if you're filming and you want to do a bit of backup behind the scenes type filming, you can do that as well. And it's just, I know it's for phones, but it's as for what it is. Like say, you look at it at first and you just want to mock it, and actually it's good for what it is by the looks of it. They've refined it.
It would come in useful. I know it would. It's one of those little things, and you're always thinking, I just really need to. I wish there was a perfect rock. Prop up the phone.
I've just been thinking, my designer brain has been going, because this is all news to me. I haven't researched this product at all. So I'm only learning it as you're speaking about it. But this is the version 2, right?
Yeah, I think they released ones before that, but of this line, yes.
Okay, so I'm going to give them an idea for version 3 here. Okay?
Oh, they reckon they've fine-tuned it. What have you got for them?
You've already mentioned that it's the size of a credit card and it fits into your wallet. Make it a credit card. I mean, come on. Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm available at a high price to anybody who wants new ideas. But, if you put this thing in your wallet, in addition to your credit card, it's an extra thing. Whereas if you could do away with the credit card because this has a little chip and pin thing on it, then, it doubles up, doesn't it? And
Mark, you're kind of forgetting that the vast majority of people now use their phones as their wallet.
Okay, last time I went to the States, which was less than a year ago, okay, Adam, who I was with, my colleague, he was trying to pay for everything using Apple Pay, and almost everywhere refused him. And me with my credit card, he was always saying, can you just buy this for me? Can you just buy this for me? And it's, I think you're ahead of the times there. You just got to go old fashioned sometimes.
Mark is staying true to his old school analog theme. What do we reckon though? I reckon the world could do with this, and I didn't expect to say that until I researched it.
Put a chip and pin on it, and I reckon it's got a big,
it's got a big
yeah.
feature
No,
it.
I like it. I'm actually going to see if I can pick one up. I think.
All right. Okay. Excellent. Well, again, links to that in the show notes. Do feel free to check that out. We're going to move on though from our gear to our final feature for this month.
Retail regrets. Oh, no. It's only money.
Never fails to amuse Harry. This is another new feature that we launched back in January, where you tell us about photography purchases you've made which have been mistakes. Maybe a product which didn't live up to what it promised, or maybe you bought something which you never have used. Do share your retail regrets with the world so that we can warn others, basically, not to make the same mistakes. We have heard this month from George, who got in touch via email. He says, a potentially controversial one. Prime lenses. I shoot mainly landscapes and travel, and from time to time since the 90s I've been undermined into thinking I'd see noticeable improvements compared to my zoom lenses, and so I bought a set of primes. However, I have never seen a material improvement at normal print viewing distances or even an 8K screen. Like most, I never view my pictures on an optical test bench. Is this sacrilege? Now, he actually got back in touch, I think, just to kind of put a caveat on here. He emailed again. He said, I thought it was worth adding that I'm not saying there aren't advantages to prime lenses, just that for my photography, which is usually at f8 or f11 and involves lugging my kit with me, I've never seen any benefit. And so the times I've invested in primes have been a retail regret, not implying they're not ideal for others. However, judging by your ooze...
So the mistake... Well, who's this from? George,
This is from George, yes.
Yeah, the mistake George has made is that he's assumed that landscape photography is going to benefit from prime lenses, and it's not really, because back in the day, in the 1980s and 1990s, when zoom lenses were kind of more in their infancy, they did suffer from image quality, certainly at their extremes. So when you use them at their longest and shortest focal length, they were never as good as they were in the middle. But nowadays, a zoom lens is pretty much good all the way through its range. But where prime lenses do have a real advantage is their maximum aperture. So if you buy a 35mm prime lens, it's typically going to be f1.4. Whereas if you buy a zoom lens, you're not going to get f1.4 through the range. But landscape photographers have no need for shallow depth of field and wide apertures, because you're typically, like George says, it's typically shooting at f8 or f11. So it's kind of pointless, really, for doing the photography that he is doing. But there's certainly advantages to prime lenses, even now, but it's really to do with the maximum aperture rather than the quality. Although, if you're going to pixel peep, then a prime lens should be better quality than a zoom lens, but you're not going to notice the difference unless you really, really analyse it, and nobody should be doing that anyway.
I think, that's the point. Most people aren't going to notice the difference in day-to-day viewing. If we're seeing it on computers, on phones, and even at decent sizes in print, you are unlikely to notice. And I mean, I agree with George. I think there are times when it would, I was just saying with the telephoto lenses, I primarily at the moment am using a prime lens, and I absolutely love it because it's phenomenally sharp. But I am often left wanting the flexibility of a zoom. And it's a trade-off, and at the moment it's still balanced that I'm kind of happy with the prime. But it's when I see lenses like the Sigma 300 to 600 or a Sony 400 to 800, I'm there almost a little bit, grass is greener on the other side, and think, well, there's a real advantage to something like that. So I rarely recommend prime lenses to people for general, even wildlife, landscapes and travel, like George is doing. You can't beat the flexibility of zoom lenses, I think. So I cannot completely understand his point of view.
Yeah. Now, one of the features that's on the ideas board for a future photography online show is to test in a proper situation how advantageous teleconverters are. Because, you've mentioned, Harry, that you use a 300mm prime lens with a teleconverter. And because it's a prime lens, it means that there is no weak spot on it. It's always working at its potential because it's been designed to work at 300mm. So when you magnify that by using a teleconverter, you're magnifying an image which is already as good as it can be. So a teleconverter is never going to improve the image, but it's not going to degrade it that much either. However, when you use a teleconverter on a zoom lens, let's just say you've got a 70 to 200 and you've got a 2x teleconverter on it, you're only going to use that teleconverter at the long end, because otherwise you're not going to use a teleconverter with it at 100mm, are you? It turns it into a 200mm lens. You've already got 200mm in the normal zoom range, so there's no point in using a teleconverter unless it's at 200mm. And at that length, then the lens isn't going to be working at its best anyway, because that's where the manufacturer has decided, right, this is the point where we can't magnify this image anymore because we started to see that it fall off. If they weren't seeing any fall off at 200, why not continue it to 250? It's going to be more appealing to the market. So when you use a teleconverter on a zoom lens, you're basically magnifying the lens working at its, one of its weakest points. And that's the problem, in that, people use them badly. So it'll be quite interesting to do a test with teleconverters and just see how beneficial they are, if they're any more beneficial than just cropping the image by 50%.
Yeah, especially with some of the new lenses that have come out, which are exceptionally good.
All right, well, George, thank you so much for getting in touch regarding that. If you guys have got any retail regrets, please do leave a comment, as we said, on whatever platform you're listening on, or you can pop us an email, podcast@mc2photography.com. Just about time, I think, for us to wrap up. Let me tell you what is coming up on Photography Online this month. On YouTube, we are continuing the Great British Icons Challenge. We are shooting a bagpiper with a camera. In Edinburgh, Nick is talking resolution and questioning, is it really that important? And Analog Affairs, we are doing our part 2 of eyeballing exposure. This is where it all starts to come together, all starts to make sense.
All falls apart.
Or all falls apart, depending on your perspective. But that is all coming up on April's Photography Online. So we're going to leave it there. Thank you, Marcus and Harry. And congratulations again, Harry, for your 2 in a row, and commiserations to Marcus. I can't wait to see what happens next time he's on. But I think we've probably got another couple of panellists in next month on the podcast. So until then, take good care. But most of all, take good photos.
You've been listening to the Photography Online podcast in partnership with Kingjoy Tripods.